Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I thought I was heading to my quiet lake cabin for peace after 6 brutal weeks in court. Instead, I found a wild party, strangers trashing my home, and a neighbor from hell claiming it was all hers. By the end of the night, I was in a hospital, and the war had just begun. I had just wrapped up 6 relentless weeks in court, dissecting crime scene evidence and testifying against a man who made my stomach churn every time I looked at him. I thought I'd spend the weekend at home in Tucson with my wife, but the idea of quiet isolation gnawed at me. My lake cabin at Saguaro had been waiting, untouched, for almost 2 months. I hadn't told anyone I was going, not even Sammy. I wanted to surprise her later, maybe call her from the dock with a cold beer in hand. My plan dissolved the moment my phone buzzed, showing Frank Hammond's name. Frank wasn't one for idle chatter, so the urgency in his voice made me sit up straight. "Jason," he said, his voice sharp and uncertain. "I don't mean to alarm you, but I think there's a wedding or something going on at your place. There's music, tents, at least 10 cars parked like they own the damn road. Did you rent the place out?" For a moment, I just stared at the phone, trying to process the absurdity of what I'd heard. "Frank, you know I'd never rent that cabin. Who the hell is there?" He sighed. "Don't know, but it's a circus. People dragging coolers, beer cans everywhere. Looks like a whole festival setup. Thought you should know before something breaks or burns." By the time he finished, I was already shoving clothes into a duffel bag. My heart pounded as I grabbed my keys and wallet. I called Sammy on speaker while I laced up my boots. "Sam, you won't believe this. Frank says someone's throwing a party at the cabin. He saw 10 cars, maybe more. I'm going out there now." "Are you kidding me?" she snapped, her voice shooting up an octave. "Do you want me to come with you? Because if some idiot is trashing our place, I swear, meet me at the house." I cut her off, already starting the truck. "We'll go together. If Frank's right, this isn't some misunderstanding. Someone broke in." The drive felt longer than usual. I kept replaying Frank's words, my knuckles white on the wheel. I tried calling the sheriff's office on the way. The dispatcher sounded half asleep. "We'll send a car when one's available, sir. Just don't engage anyone directly." "Wait for law enforcement." "Right," I muttered, ending the call. Like hell I was waiting. By the time I swung by the house to pick up Sammy, my blood was boiling. She jumped into the truck with her phone ready, muttering something about how she should have brought the baseball bat. As we turned onto the gravel road that led to the property, I knew Frank hadn't exaggerated. There were more than 10 cars, closer to 15, all lined up like it was valet parking. Someone had hung string lights between trees, and the bass from the music rattled the windows of my truck. The gate, my locked gate, was wide open. Sammy's jaw dropped. "What the hell is this, Jason?" I didn't answer. I pulled over just short of the driveway, killed the engine, and got out. The smell of grilled meat mixed with beer and cheap perfume hit me like a wave. On the front lawn, half-naked people danced around a fire pit, red plastic cups raised like they were at some college tailgate. My deck was covered in muddy footprints, and someone had tied balloons to the railing. On the front door, taped like a joke, was a white sheet of paper that read, "Private party, do not knock." I ripped it off, feeling the wood underneath sticky with beer. Sammy followed me, already recording on her phone, muttering a steady stream of curses under her breath. I pushed open the door and froze. My cabin looked like a frat house after a tornado. The kitchen island had been transformed into a makeshift bar, lined with bottles and half-empty mixers. My bathtub was filled with ice and beer cans. Someone's leather jacket hung from the antlers above the fireplace, and muddy shoes were scattered across the hallway. Then I saw her, Karen Litchfield, standing in my living room in a sequined dress, holding a wine glass like it was a royal scepter. She turned and smiled, that smug expression I'd seen one too many times back in Tucson when she accidentally wandered onto my property under the pretense of delivering cookies. "Jason, you're early," she said, as if I'd been invited. "Don't be mad. We're just having a little get-together. You know, keeping the place lively." "What the hell are you talking about?" I snapped. "This is my house. Everyone out now." A group of guys by the kitchen snickered. One of them, tall with a beer belly and a baseball cap turned backward, stepped toward me. "Yo, who's this guy? Party crasher?" Before I could respond, Karen laughed, sipping her wine. "Don't worry about him. He's family, sort of." "Just relax, Jason. Don't ruin the mood." I took a step forward, my fists clenched. "This ends now. Get them out before I call the cops myself." The guy in the cap smirked and glanced at his buddies. Call the cops? Man, this is our night. Why don't you chill before someone gets hurt? I could feel Sammy's hand on my arm, her phone still recording. My mind was a storm of disbelief and anger. This wasn't just trespassing. This was theft, invasion, and arrogance on a level I hadn't thought possible. The second I stepped fully into the living room, the stench of spilled beer and stale sweat made me want to vomit. My once polished hardwood floors were sticky, covered in footprints and puddles of something that looked like soda mixed with alcohol. My leather couch, the one I'd bought with my father 20 years ago, had been turned into a lounging zone for two couples who looked up at me with glassy eyes and zero shame. One guy actually had the nerve to raise his beer can toward me like a toast before going back to kissing the girl on his lap. "Get out," I barked. My voice cracked through the music, but the reaction was mixed. Some laughs, a few muttered curses. The guy in the backwards cap stepped closer. His buddies followed, 3 of them in total, all carrying the weight of too many drinks and too much testosterone. I sized them up out of habit. Old training, wide shoulders, heavy boots, and the kind of attitude that screamed trouble. Karen, still smiling like she was at a charity gala, tilted her head. "Jason, come on, it's just one night. Everyone needed a place to unwind, and your cabin was, well, perfect." I told them you wouldn't mind. "You told them I wouldn't mind?" I repeated, my tone low and dangerous. "Karen, you broke into my home. You stole my keys. And now you're telling me you invited 50 people here without permission." "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said, swirling her wine. "You're barely ever here. Honestly, you should thank me for keeping the place alive." I felt my jaw clench so hard I thought my teeth would crack. "Get out," I repeated, stepping toward her. "Now." The guy in the cap put a hand on my chest. "Hey man, why don't you back off? Karen said this place is hers to use. Maybe you're the one who needs to leave." I stared at his hand, then at him. "Move it before I break it." The tension crackled like static. Behind me, I heard Sammy's voice, sharp and unwavering. "I'm recording this. Every single face. Every word." She held up her phone. "So maybe think twice about touching him again." The second guy, shorter but stockier, sneered. "What are you going to do, sweetheart? Post it on Instagram. No one's leaving just because you two decided to ruin the party." I turned slightly to Sammy, whispering, "Call Frank. Get him here now. And call the cops again. Tell them it's assault if they don't show up fast." Karen's smile faltered just for a second. "Jason, really, there's no need for all this drama. These are friends, just having fun. Why don't you grab a drink?" "Relax." I let out a bitter laugh. "You think I'm drinking while strangers trash my property? Are you out of your mind?" I moved to shut off the speaker blaring in the corner. The third guy lunged, grabbing my shoulder. "Touch the music, and you're done." That was it. I shoved him back, and he stumbled into the coffee table, sending plastic cups flying. His buddy swung at me, a clumsy punch fueled by cheap whiskey. I ducked and countered with a hard shove, but the first guy in the cap tackled me to the floor. My back hit the sticky wood, and a knee dug into my ribs. I could hear Sammy yelling my name, her voice laced with panic. "Get off me!" I roared, thrashing under the weight. The third guy kicked my side while I tried to get up, pain exploding across my ribs. I managed to grab the guy's shirt and twist, rolling us both over, but then the cap guy's fist cracked across my jaw. My vision went white for a second. Sammy's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop it! You're on camera, you psychos!" But one of the men shoved her arm, making the phone slip from her hand. It clattered across the floor. I tried to stand, but another blow hit me in the temple, sending the room spinning. My body went limp before I could process what was happening. The last thing I saw before blacking out was Karen standing frozen, her wine glass still in hand, watching the chaos unravel with wide eyes but not moving a damn muscle. When I came to, the first thing I noticed was the faint antiseptic smell and the persistent beep of a heart monitor. For a moment, I had no idea where I was. My head throbbed like it had been split in two, and every breath sent a sharp pain through my side. Then the pieces clicked back together. The party, Karen, the fight. I blinked at the harsh fluorescent light above me and tried to sit up, only to realize my right arm was wrapped tightly in a splint. The pain shot through me like fire. "Jason, don't move." Sammy's voice came from my left. She looked pale, but unhurt, though I could see a small bruise forming near her temple. "You're at Apache County Hospital. They said you have a fractured arm and some cracked ribs. You scared the hell out of me." I groaned, trying to shift. Where's Frank? Where's that circus? Frank's outside talking to the sheriff, she said, her tone clipped. As for the circus, half of them bolted the second they realized you weren't getting up. I recorded as much as I could, but some drunk idiot knocked my phone down. Still, I have video of Karen and those thugs hitting you. It's enough. Before I could reply, the door swung open. Frank Hammond walked in, his weathered face etched with worry. Behind him was Sheriff Cole, a broad-shouldered man I'd met once or twice over the years. "Jason," Frank said, "you look like hell." "Feel like it too," I muttered. "Tell me you hauled those idiots away in handcuffs." The sheriff shifted his hat slightly, his expression professional but cautious. "We detained a few individuals at the scene, but by the time deputies arrived, most guests had fled. Karen Litchfield was still there, but she claims this is all a misunderstanding. Says she was given permission to host the event." I nearly laughed, though it came out as a wheezing cough. "Permission? From who?" "My ghost." Sammy grabbed her phone and played a short clip she'd managed to save before things spiraled out of control. The video showed Karen standing near the fireplace, telling a group of people, "Don't let them in. This is my party. I have the keys. They can leave if they don't like it." The sheriff's eyes narrowed as he watched the footage. "That's something, but I'll need full statements from both of you. We'll be pressing charges, trespassing, assault, maybe even breaking and entering if we can confirm she had no right to be there." "She didn't," I said, my voice hoarse but firm. "Those keys? I never gave them to her. She must have copied them at some point. She's been nosy ever since I met her, always offering to check on the place when I'm gone. Guess I know why now." Frank spoke up, his voice low but edged with anger. "Sheriff, I saw that woman directing the crowd like it was her property. She even told some kids to move their cars onto Jason's lawn. This wasn't some innocent mix-up. She knew damn well what she was doing." The sheriff scribbled in his notebook. "We'll get to the bottom of it. For now, rest. I'll have my deputies collect security footage from your cabin if any cameras were running." "They were," I said, wincing as I adjusted my pillow. "I keep motion-triggered recorders all around the property. If Karen's been there before, I'll know." Sammy's voice hardened. "She's not getting away with this, Jason, not after what they did to you." I met her gaze and nodded. My face felt swollen and I could taste blood at the back of my throat. But beneath all the pain, a cold determination settled in. Karen had crossed a line I didn't even know existed, and I wasn't just going to sit around and lick my wounds. I was released from the hospital the next afternoon with my arm in a cast and a warning to avoid strenuous activity for at least 6 weeks. Good luck with that. By the time Sammy drove me back into town, my phone was blowing up. Messages from Frank, 2 voicemails from the sheriff's office, and even a call from a local news reporter who somehow caught wind of the Lake House brawl. Apparently, Karen, or one of her guests, had decided to spin their own story online, painting me as some crazed lunatic who attacked a bunch of innocent partygoers. The lies were spreading fast, and I wasn't about to let them take root. Back at the cabin, the place looked like a war zone. The front gate hung crooked. Someone had driven a truck across my yard, leaving deep ruts, and the deck was littered with cigarette butts and crushed beer cans. Inside, the scene was even worse. My kitchen island had sticky rings from dozens of glasses. The bathroom floor was covered in melted ice and water stains. My couch, my leather couch, had a tear in the side, like someone had sliced it with a knife. I stood there, jaw tight, absorbing the damage in silence. Sammy, always quicker to voice her thoughts, let out a long, angry whistle. "This isn't a party," she muttered. "This is a damn crime scene." I fired up the cabin's security system, which stores footage on an offline hard drive. Every camera, driveway, porch, backyard, and interior hallway had recorded for the past 72 hours. As we scrolled through the footage on my laptop, the evidence stacked up like a court exhibit. There was Karen 2 days ago, arriving in her pearl-white SUV, unlocking my gate with a key she wasn't supposed to have. There she was again, walking through my front door with a cooler in one hand and a smug grin on her face. Later, the video showed her directing people where to park, where to set up tents, and even collecting cash from a group of 20-somethings who carried beer kegs into my garage. She was charging them, Sammy said, pointing at the screen. "She's been making money off your property." "That's felony-level stupidity," I muttered, rewinding to catch more details. One of the clips even showed her handing a guy a crumpled list, a schedule, I guessed, because a few hours later, a DJ setup appeared in my living room. Watching it felt surreal, like I was spying on some alternate reality where my cabin was a public club and I was the unwelcome stranger. I transferred the footage to an external drive and called Sheriff Cole. "I've got evidence," I said. "Not just trespassing, this is illegal rental, fraud, and probably property damage exceeding 10 grand. When can we meet?" "Bring it tonight," he replied. "We're already questioning a few attendees we managed to track down. Karen's playing dumb, saying she thought the cabin was abandoned." "Abandoned?" I nearly laughed. "Does that sound abandoned to you?" I turned my phone so the sheriff could hear Sammy yelling in the background as she tried to scrape dried salsa off my kitchen wall. Cole chuckled dryly. "Yeah, that's what I thought." Before meeting the sheriff, I made a pit stop at Frank's house. The old man was sitting on his porch with a cold beer, shaking his head. "Jason, I've seen my fair share of fools, but this woman takes the cake. She acted like she owned your place. Told me I was welcome to swing by for a drink any time since we're neighbors. I told her I wasn't stepping one damn foot onto your land without your say-so. She gave me that look. You know, the 'I'm better than you' look. She's about to learn what that look is worth," I said, holding up the hard drive. "I've got her dead to rights." Later that evening, at the sheriff's office, Cole and one of his deputies reviewed the footage with growing disbelief. "She brought in at least 50 people. The deputy muttered, "That's not a party. That's an event. And look at this. She's taking cash. Did you know about this, Mr. Thorne?" "Would I be standing here with a broken arm if I did?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "She's been using my property like her personal business. I want every single charge we can throw at her." Cole nodded. "We'll start with unlawful entry, vandalism, and assault. But with the footage of her collecting money, we can add theft and illegal rental operations. This is going to the district attorney." As we wrapped up, Sammy leaned toward me. "You realize she's not going to back down easily, right? A woman like that doesn't just roll over." "Good," I said, "because neither do I." When we left the sheriff's office, I glanced at the damage reports they'd compiled. Broken furniture, stolen kitchenware, even a burnt patch near the outdoor fire pit where someone had dumped hot coals onto the grass. The total damages were climbing fast. My blood simmered. I wasn't just going to fix my cabin. I was going to make sure Karen and her little entourage paid for every cent and every bruise. That night, I barely slept. The footage kept replaying in my mind. Karen smiling, clinking glasses, parading through my living room like she'd earned it. It was more than trespassing. It was personal. The next morning started with a call from my lawyer, Mark Hughes, a no-nonsense former prosecutor who didn't believe in waiting around. I'd sent him snippets of the footage overnight, and he'd already drawn up an initial complaint. "Jason, this is bigger than simple trespassing," he said, his voice clipped and precise. "We've got evidence of breaking and entering, commercial misuse of private property, and organized assault. If we push this hard, we can sue for damages and pursue criminal charges simultaneously. We need to strike while the evidence is fresh." "I'm ready," I said, staring at the ruined deck outside my window. "Let's bury her in paperwork." "She's not getting away with this." Sammy was pacing behind me, holding her phone like it was a weapon. "She's online, Jason, look." She turned the screen toward me. There it was. Karen's smug face in a Facebook post, smiling with a glass of wine, captioned, "Throwback to the best party at my cousin's lake house. What a night." The nerve of her was unbelievable. She was actually trying to pass off my cabin as her relative's property. I felt my blood pressure spike. Save that post. Screenshot everything. That's more evidence of her lying. By mid-morning, Mark had filed a civil lawsuit for property damages and illegal entry, and we were already drafting a criminal complaint with the sheriff's office. Sheriff Cole called to let me know they'd officially questioned Karen. "She's denying everything, of course," he said, his tone tired but amused. "Says you gave her permission months ago, claims she's just a caretaker. But we've got the footage and your statement. The DA is interested in moving forward." "She's not a caretaker," I growled. "She's a thief with a wine glass." Before lunch, Frank came by, carrying a brown envelope. "You're gonna love this," he said, handing it over. Inside were printouts from a local Telegram group called Cabin Bash at Saguaro. The posts made my stomach churn. Karen had been advertising my property as a private lake retreat for weeks, charging guests cash to rent the place for one-night blowouts. She even posted a calendar of upcoming events. Looks like she's been doing this for at least 2 months, Frank said. Some folks down the road told me they saw her hosting smaller parties on your lawn, but they figured you gave her permission. Permission? Sammy snapped. Jason would sooner burn the place down than let Karen host a party here. I handed the evidence to Mark during a call that afternoon. This is gold, he said. With this, we can add fraud and illegal commercial use. And if she collected cash while knowing she had no rights to the property, that's theft. It didn't take long before the news caught up. A local reporter knocked on our door, microphone in hand. Mr. Thorne, is it true that a neighbor used your property for unauthorized events? I stared at her, weighing my options, and then decided to play this to my advantage. Yes, I said into the camera, and I have all the evidence needed to prove it. This is not a misunderstanding. It's criminal. By evening, Karen must have realized her narrative was falling apart. She called Sammy's phone, leaving a voicemail so smug it made my jaw tighten. Jason, sweetheart, we can settle this quietly. You know it was all in good fun. Let's not drag the whole neighborhood into drama. Sammy nearly hurled the phone across the room. I called Mark again. She's trying to wiggle out of this. What's next? Next, he said, we subpoena her financial records. If she collected cash for these parties, we'll show the court how she profited from your property. We'll also get statements from attendees. With the videos and Frank's testimony, she's cornered. Sheriff Cole rang me later that night. We've identified 2 of the men who assaulted you. Both were at the hospital this morning with bruised knuckles and hangovers. We've got enough to arrest them. We'll keep digging to track down the rest. I felt a grim satisfaction. Good. Make sure they know they picked the wrong guy to mess with. Sammy and I spent the evening cataloging everything. We took hundreds of photos, broken fence slats, the ruined couch, beer stains on the wooden floors, even the burn marks near the outdoor fire pit where someone had tossed embers onto the grass. The total damages were already estimated at over $15,000, and that was just the beginning. The deck alone would cost a fortune to refinish. Every corner of the cabin carried the stench of someone else's disrespect. Later, over coffee at the kitchen table, Sammy looked at me with a steady, determined glare. We're going to nail her, Jason. No way are we letting this slide. Damn right we aren't, I said, gripping the mug with my good hand. If she wants a fight, I'll give her the kind of fight she'll never forget. By the next morning, the story had already made the front page of the local news site. Neighbor accused of hosting illegal parties at private lake cabin. Owner hospitalized after brawl. There was even a grainy screenshot from Sammy's video showing Karen in her glittering dress, holding her wine glass like some self-appointed queen of chaos. The comment section was a battlefield. Half the town seemed ready to string her up, while a few die-hard trolls claimed I was just overreacting. I didn't care what anyone online thought. I cared about putting Karen and her little band of freeloaders where they belonged, in front of a judge. Mark, my lawyer, called at 9 a.m. sharp. Jason, things are moving fast. I've already been in touch with the district attorney's office. With the footage and the Telegram chat logs Frank found, we can pursue charges for fraud and illegal profit. We'll need affidavits from the neighbors, and we'll also subpoena Karen's financial records. I bet she's pocketed a small fortune from this. She's been running a scam on my property, I said, staring out at the ruined lawn. I'm not letting her crawl out of this with a slap on the wrist. Sammy chimed in from the kitchen, holding her phone. You're not going to believe this, she said. Karen just posted again on Facebook, saying, the cabin thing is being blown out of proportion. It's all just a misunderstanding between friends. Friends? Who breaks someone's ribs at a friendly gathering? Mark sighed on the other end. Good. Let her dig her own grave. Every public statement she makes can be used against her. We'll collect screenshots, and I'll file for a restraining order today. She's not setting one foot near that cabin again. Later that afternoon, Sheriff Cole invited me to review some witness statements at the station. You're going to love this, he said, handing me a folder. Inside were transcripts from 3 attendees who had already been questioned. One young guy admitted he'd paid $50 to reserve a spot at the party and had no idea it wasn't Karen's property. Another described how Karen handed out rules for the night, including a warning to ignore any uninvited guests who might show up. She planned this like she was running a nightclub, Cole muttered. Even told people to park in your yard so they wouldn't block the road. And the 2 guys who attacked me? I asked. They're both in custody now, he said. One's trying to claim you started it by barging in, but the video from your cameras shows the truth. We'll hit them with assault and battery. You want to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. Every charge possible. On the way back, Frank flagged me down from his porch. "Jason, I heard from my cousin over in the next county. Turns out Karen's done this kind of thing before. Not as bold as this, but she's known for bending rules." He said she once tried to rent out an old barn that wasn't hers, claiming it was part of her family estate. The woman's a serial liar. This didn't surprise me. Back at the cabin, Sammy and I continued documenting every inch of damage. We discovered more chaos, burned spots on the deck where someone dropped cigars, scratches on the kitchen counter from careless knife work, even a broken window in the guest room. I made a detailed list for the insurance claim, though part of me wanted to hand Karen the bill directly and watch her choke on it. Mark called again that evening. "Jason, I've spoken to a few of the party guests. Some are willing to testify that Karen not only organized these events, but also told them you were an absent cousin who didn't care about the property. One guy even saved text messages where she promised a private lake house getaway." "That's solid." "Fraud perfect," I said, gripping the phone. "We'll bring it all to court. What's our timeline?" "We're filing the full complaint tomorrow. Meanwhile, I'll work with the DA to ensure criminal charges proceed in parallel." She's going to face the kind of legal storm she's never imagined. That night, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I stood on my porch, staring at the lake. The water was calm, a sharp contrast to the chaos swirling in my life. Sammy joined me, slipping her arm through my good one. "She's cornered, Jason," she said softly. "But don't underestimate her. Women like Karen fight dirty when they're desperate." I nodded, watching the reflection of the last light on the water. "Then I guess I'll have to fight dirtier." The courthouse smelled like old paper, cheap coffee, and nerves. I stood there in my best flannel shirt and jeans, sling on my arm while Sammy fussed over the angle of my tie, as if that would make me look less like someone who had just been in a bar fight with 3 drunken idiots. Mark, my lawyer, was already inside, flipping through a mountain of documents. "Today is just the pretrial hearing," he reminded me, "but it's important. We show the judge that this isn't a petty dispute between neighbors. It's organized trespassing, assault, and fraud." Karen arrived 15 minutes late, flanked by a man who looked like he'd been plucked straight from a TV courtroom drama. Slick. Suit, fake tan, and the arrogance of someone who thought charm could rewrite facts. Karen herself looked like she was headed to a country club brunch rather than a hearing. White blazer, oversized sunglasses, and that same smug smile that had been burned into my brain since the night of the party. She didn't look at me at first, but when our eyes finally met, she raised her chin as if I were beneath her. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense stare, wasted no time. "Mr. Thorne, your counsel may proceed," she said. Mark stood and laid out our case with surgical precision. The illegal entry, the assault that left me hospitalized, the documented damage to the property, and most importantly, the fraudulent rental scheme Karen had been running. He played clips from the security footage right there in the courtroom. Karen handing over keys, directing people around the property, laughing as she collected money. The room went silent, except for the sound of her own voice saying, "This is my party, I have the keys." Karen's lawyer stood, all smooth smiles and fake concern. "Your Honor, this is clearly a misunderstanding. My client believed she had permission to use the cabin. She was under the impression that Mr. Thorne had given her informal access. She even took care of the property in his absence." "Really?" the judge asked, one eyebrow arched. "Because it looks to me like she was hosting commercial events." Karen tried to interject, lifting her sunglasses like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "Your Honor, I only wanted to bring life to a place that was being neglected." "Jason never said I couldn't." "Neglected?" I snapped before I could stop myself. "That's my family's cabin, and you trashed it. You had 50 drunk strangers tearing the place apart. You broke my furniture, stole my privacy, and put me in the hospital. Don't you dare talk about neglect." The judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Thorne, you'll let your attorney speak for you." I clenched my jaw and nodded, forcing myself to sit back. Mark took over smoothly. "Your Honor, we have documented evidence that Ms. Litchfield profited from these events. Witnesses have already testified that they paid her directly. We also have a record of prior incidents involving similar behavior in other counties. This was not a one-time lapse of judgment. It's a pattern." Karen's lawyer tried to argue that the videos were taken out of context, but the judge wasn't buying it. At one point, the judge looked over her glasses and said, "Ms., Litchfield, do you have any written proof of this supposed permission from Mr. Thorne? Karen hesitated, fumbling with her purse. Well, no, but I have my word. And your word won't hold against this mountain of evidence, the judge said flatly. This case will proceed to trial. As we left the courtroom, Karen brushed past me, muttering under her breath, "You'll regret this, Jason. I'll bury you in legal fees." I turned and smiled, but it wasn't a friendly one. Good luck, Karen. You're already digging your own grave. Outside, reporters swarmed like vultures. Sammy handled most of the questions, explaining how we discovered the illegal parties and the damage left behind. I stood beside her, silent but firm, every bruise and bandage on me a visual testimony to Karen's insanity. Mark told the press, "We will be pursuing every available legal avenue. This is not just about property. This is about personal safety and justice." Later that night, I got a call from Sheriff Cole. "Jason, I thought you'd want to know. One of the guys who attacked you flipped. He gave us a copy of the private group chat Karen used to organize these parties. There's no doubt she was charging for entry. It's all there in black and white." "That's perfect," I said, gripping the phone tightly. "Send it to Mark. Let's end this." The trial itself was a circus, but one where every clown was on Karen's side of the courtroom. It lasted 3 full days, and by the end of it, she looked less like the smug queen of the lake and more like a desperate woman trying to wriggle out of a noose she'd tied for herself. The district attorney came down hard, presenting every piece of evidence we'd gathered: the security footage, the screenshots of her Telegram cabin bash chat, the Facebook posts, and the testimonies from guests who admitted they had paid cash to attend her events. Mark, my lawyer, was relentless. He painted a picture of a woman who had crossed every possible line, from trespassing to commercial fraud. He even introduced a financial analysis that showed Karen had made over $2,000 from these illegal parties in just the past 2 months. The 2 men who attacked me were brought into the courtroom in orange jumpsuits, heads down, as they pled guilty to aggravated assault in exchange for reduced sentences. When they described how Karen had told them to handle me if I showed up, the jury's faces hardened. Karen's defense crumbled quickly. She tried everything, sobbing about being a lonely widow, claiming she misunderstood the property ownership, even suggesting that I had given her verbal permission during a casual conversation at a neighborhood barbecue. Mark shredded every lie. "If Mr. Thorne had given you permission," he said, holding up a photo of my broken window and torn furniture, "why did you feel the need to copy his keys behind his back? Why charge strangers cash? Why instruct your guests to ignore anyone who tries to come inside?" Karen tried to fire back, but her voice wavered. "It was just, I thought the place was empty most of the time. I didn't think he'd care." The judge cut her off. "That's not how property ownership works, Ms. Litchfield. Your actions were deliberate, and they caused harm, both financial and physical. When the verdict came, it was swift and unforgiving." Karen was found guilty on multiple charges: trespassing, fraud, property damage, and conspiracy to commit assault. She was sentenced to 14 years in prison. The 2 men who attacked me each received 7 years. 4 other individuals involved in organizing the event were given probation, heavy fines, and a restraining order preventing them from coming near my property. The court also awarded me nearly $180,000 in damages, which would cover repairs, medical bills, and legal fees. The day Karen was led away in handcuffs, she shot me one last glare, not of shame, but of pure hatred. I didn't flinch. I'd spent enough energy on her madness. Now, all I wanted was to reclaim my peace. Over the following months, Sammy and I rebuilt the cabin. The deck was replaced, the furniture restored, and every inch of the property fortified with new cameras and reinforced locks. Yet, something had shifted. I realized that the cabin was no longer just a getaway. It was a place that carried a story, a scar. One evening, over a glass of whiskey on the porch, I made a decision. I called the county and offered to lease the cabin as an educational property, a place for law students and community programs to learn about property rights, legal consequences, and the reality of trespassing laws. They jumped at the idea. A year later, I stood on the same porch, but this time next to a small bronze plaque that read, "This is where the parties ended, and the law began." Inside, framed on the wall, hung printed screenshots of Karen's chat messages, photos from the courtroom, and a copy of the judge's final ruling. People who came to visit often laughed at the absurdity of the story, but they left understanding something deeper. Private property is not just a patch of land. It's a boundary of trust. Sammy leaned against me that evening, smiling. You know, part of me still can't believe this all started because one woman couldn't keep her nose out of your business. Karen thought she could own my life for one night, I said, taking a slow sip of my drink. Instead, she just made this place legendary. The sun dipped over Saguaro Lake, painting the water in gold. For the first time in months, I felt the silence I'd been craving. A silence earned, guarded, and finally respected.